Welcome back to HOA Mess. I thought the case was closed until they came for me. Ruth slapped a stack of meeting minutes on the table and yelled that the minutes were the truth even if they made no sense. The pages fanned out across the folding table under the clubhouse eave, rain misting sideways just past the overhang. I stood there in my gray work shirt with the hood up, phone recording light visible in my hand, screen turned away, and I did not blink. "You are about to get another letter," she said, jabbing her finger at my chest without quite touching me. Her gray visor dripped at the brim. The tiny body camera clipped to her blazer lapel blinked red, which she had forgotten was still rolling. I work as an EMT dispatcher, which means I cannot miss calls, and Ruth Phillips knew that. She also knew my custody schedule, my guest parking rotation, and apparently the exact days my ex dropped off my daughter, because every violation notice landed on those exact evenings. I moved to the preserve at Oak Grove Reserve Association in Minneapolis 8 months ago because the rent was reasonable and the commute to dispatch was clean. A neighbor, an older guy named Tom, who lived 3 doors down, pulled me aside 2 weeks after I signed the lease. He told me the prior homeowner in my unit fought the HOA over a towing incident and then moved suddenly. Tom did not have details, just a vague memory of raised voices at a meeting and a for sale sign going up within the month. I thanked him and filed it away as neighborhood gossip. Then my car got towed. It was a Tuesday night in March. I came home from a 12-hour shift, parked in my assigned spot, and went inside. 4 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from the tow company saying my vehicle had been relocated for a violation. No warning sticker, no courtesy knock, just gone. I called the number and got a recording. I called the HOA emergency line and got Ruth. She told me the vehicle was improperly registered and the tow was authorized per association policy. I asked what that meant. She said my parking pass was not displayed. I told her I had the pass on my dash, exactly where the rules said to put it. She paused, then said the pass format had changed and I needed to reapply through the portal. I asked when that policy went into effect. She said it was in the last meeting minutes, which were posted online. I pulled up the minutes on my phone while she waited. The section on parking mentioned nothing about a format change. I pointed that out. Ruth said the minutes were preliminary and subject to board approval, so the real policy might not match what was posted yet. I asked how I was supposed to follow a policy that was not posted. She said homeowners were expected to stay informed and check the portal regularly for updates. Then she hung up. I paid the tow fee that night, $260, because I needed my car for work. The next morning I filed an appeal through the HOA portal. The form required a written explanation, supporting documents, and a hearing request. I attached photos of my dash with the pass visible, a screenshot of the outdated minutes, and a 1-page letter explaining the timeline. I submitted it before my shift started. 3 days later, I got an email saying my appeal was denied for insufficient evidence. No hearing, no follow-up questions, just a denial with a link to pay the fine or face collections. I called the management company. The woman who answered said appeals were handled by the board and she could not override their decision. I asked to speak to someone with authority. She transferred me to a voicemail box that never called back. That was when I started digging. I went back through the portal and pulled every meeting minute from the past 2 years. I printed them and put them in a tabbed binder, 1 tab per month, with my notes in the margins. I was looking for the parking policy change, What I found instead was a pattern. In June of last year, a homeowner named Stevens filed a complaint about a tow. The minutes said the board reviewed the matter and found the tow was authorized. No details, no explanation, just a single sentence buried in the committee report section. In September, another homeowner, Lou, filed a similar complaint. Same result, same vague language. In December, a third complaint from someone named Alvarez. Same outcome. Then I noticed something else. Every complaint was listed under the treasurer's report, which meant Ruth handled them. Every tow was authorized by the same company, a place called Metro Secure Towing. And every tow happened within 48 hours of a meeting where Ruth presented a compliance update. I called Tom and asked if he remembered Stevens. He said Stevens was the prior tenant in my unit. He said Stevens fought the tow for months, got nowhere, and moved out suddenly after the HOA threatened collections. I asked if Stevens ever got a hearing. Tom said no. The board kept postponing it, and eventually, Stevens just gave up. I went to the county records office and requested the full property file for my address. The clerk handed me a folder with deed transfers, tax records, and a stack of lien notices. Buried at the bottom was a satisfaction of lien dated 2 months before Stevens moved out. The lien was for unpaid HOA fees, but the amount matched the tow fine to the dollar. I took a photo of the page with my phone. That night, I opened the HOA portal to check my appeal status. The appeal was gone. Not denied, not pending, just gone. The submission page showed no record of my request. I checked my email. The denial message was still there, time-stamped 3 days ago, with a case number. I called the management company again. The same woman answered. I gave her the case number and asked why the portal showed nothing. She put me on hold for 6 minutes, then came back and said the portal was experiencing technical issues and my appeal would be reinstated within 48 hours. It was not. 2 weeks later, Ruth sent a vendor to my door. The guy was wearing a Metro Secure Towing jacket and carrying a clipboard with no readable text. He said he was there to verify my vehicle compliance. I asked who sent him. He said the HOA treasurer requested a compliance check. I asked if he was authorized to enter the property. He said he was contracted by the association. I told him I was recording the conversation and asked to see his authorization paperwork. He looked at his clipboard, then at me, then said he would come back later. He left. I called a local attorney I knew through family, a woman named Diane who handled property disputes. I explained the situation. She listened, asked a few questions, then said I had 3 options. 1. Pay the fine and move on. 2. File a lawsuit which would cost more than the fine and take years. 3. Build a case and force the HOA to settle by making it more expensive to fight than to refund me. She said option 3 required patience, documentation, and a willingness to make the board uncomfortable in front of other homeowners. She also said if I found proof of fraud, she could escalate it to the state attorney general. I chose option 3. I started attending every board meeting. The Preserve at Oak Grove Reserve Association held meetings on the 3rd Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. Attendance was usually 6 or 7 people, mostly board members and 1 or 2 homeowners with complaints. Ruth sat at the head table with the president, a retired banker named Ed, and the secretary, a woman named Jan, who typed everything on a laptop. At my first meeting, I signed in and took a seat in the back. Ruth saw me and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Ed called the meeting to order and read through the agenda. When public comments opened, I stood up and said I wanted to discuss my tow appeal. Ruth cut in before Ed could respond. She said appeals were handled through the portal and could not be discussed in open session due to privacy rules. I said the portal deleted my appeal and I had proof. She said that was a technical issue and I needed to resubmit. I said I already resubmitted twice, and both disappeared. She said she would look into it. Ed moved to the next agenda item. After the meeting, I waited by the door. Ruth walked past me with her tabbed binder under one arm and her phone in the other hand. I asked when I could expect a response. She stopped, turned, and said she did not have time for this. I said I had time. She said I was being dramatic. I said I just wanted my appeal processed. She said I do not need proof, I have paperwork and vibes. Then she walked out. I went home and pulled the portal logs. Every time I submitted an appeal, the system generated a confirmation email with a case number and a timestamp. I had 3 emails, 3 case numbers, and 3 timestamps. I logged into the portal and checked the case history. All 3 cases showed as opened, then closed within minutes, all from the same admin account. The account username was Treasurer Admin. I took screenshots. The next week, Ruth escalated. A notice appeared on my door, printed on HOA letterhead, stating that my vehicle was in violation of guest parking rules. The notice said I had used a guest spot on 4 separate occasions without authorization and owed $50 per incident. I did not own a second vehicle. I called the number on the notice. Ruth answered. She said the violations were recorded by the compliance vendor. I asked which vendor. She said Metro Secure Towing. I asked how a tow company was tracking guest parking. She said they contracted security patrols as part of the HOA service agreement. I asked to see the contract. She said contracts were confidential. I said the bylaws required financial transparency. She said I could request documents through the portal, which would take 30 days to process. I asked if she understood I was recording the call. She said I am calling management and I am going to be dramatic about it. Then she hung up. I submitted a records request through the portal that night. I asked for the Metro Secure Towing Service Agreement, all tow authorizations from the past 2 years, and the compliance vendor contract. I attached my 3 prior case numbers and asked for an explanation of why they were deleted. I marked the request urgent and cited the bylaws section on homeowner access to records. 3 days later, the HOA attorney sent me a letter. The letter said my records request was overly broad, burdensome, and duplicative. It said I could resubmit with narrower scope. It also said continued harassment of board members could result in a restraining order. I forwarded the letter to Diane. She read it and laughed. She said it was a bluff and I should ignore it. She also said the deleted case numbers were a smoking gun and I needed to lock that evidence down before someone scrubbed the server. I printed the screenshots and added them to my binder. I also started keeping a running timeline with dates, receipts, and notes. Every interaction with Ruth went in the timeline. Every notice, every email, every phone call. Diane said if this ever went to a hearing or settlement, the timeline would be the spine of my case. Then the HOA threatened collections. The letter came certified mail, return receipt required. It said I had 14 days to pay the outstanding tow fine and guest parking violations, or the account would be sent to collections, which could affect my credit and result in a lien on the property. The total was $460. I called Diane. She said collections language was serious and I needed to act fast. She said the 14-day window meant they were trying to rush it through before I could respond. She also said if the tow was fraudulent, the collections threat was extortion, which was a crime. She told me to file a police report and send a cease and desist letter to the HOA attorney. She said she would draft the letter. I went to the police station that afternoon. The officer at the desk listened to my story, took notes, and said it sounded like a civil dispute. I said the HOA deleted my appeals and was threatening collections based on a fraudulent tow. He said unless I had proof of forgery or theft, it was still a civil matter. I showed him the screenshots. He looked at them, then said he would file a report but could not guarantee any follow-up. I took the report number and left. Diane sent the cease and desist letter the next morning. It cited the deleted appeals, the missing records, and the collections threat. It demanded the HOA retract the collections letter, refund the tow fine, and provide the requested records within 7 days. It also said failure to comply would result in a formal complaint to the State Attorney General and a lawsuit for harassment and abusive process. The HOA did not respond. Instead, Ruth called a special meeting. The notice went out via email with 48 hours advance. The agenda had one item: discussion of homeowner compliance and parking enforcement. My name was not mentioned, but the timing was obvious. I forwarded the email to Diane. She said it was a railroading attempt and I should attend with my evidence ready. She also said Ruth would try to control the narrative, so I needed to stay calm and let her overreach. The meeting was on a Thursday night. I arrived early with my tabbed binder and my phone. Ruth was already there, setting up a projector. Ed and Jan sat at the head table. A few neighbors trickled in, including Tom. Ruth saw me and smiled again. It was the same smile from before. Ed called the meeting to order. He said the board had received complaints about selective enforcement and wanted to clarify parking policies. Ruth stood up and started a PowerPoint presentation. The slides showed photos of vehicles and guest spots, all with timestamps. My car was in 3 of the photos. Ruth said the compliance vendor had documented multiple violations and the fines were consistent with policy. She said homeowners who refused to pay would face collections. I raised my hand. Ed nodded at me. I stood up and said I had proof my appeals were deleted. Ruth interrupted and said appeals were processed according to procedure. I said the screenshots showed her admin account closed my cases within minutes of submission. She said that was a technical glitch. I said it happened 3 times. She said the portal vendor was investigating. I asked who the portal vendor was. She did not answer. Tom stood up. He said he remembered Stevens, the prior tenant in my unit, fighting the same tow issue. He said Stevens claimed Ruth authorized the tow without cause. Ruth said that was hearsay. Tom said he was at the meeting where Stevens presented evidence. Ruth said the board reviewed the evidence and found it insufficient. Tom asked where the meeting minutes were. Ruth said they were archived. I asked if I could request the archived minutes. Ruth said archived records required a formal request and a processing fee. I said I already submitted a records request and got no response. She said my request was overly broad. I said I narrowed it to 3 specific items. She said she had not seen a revised request. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and showed her the sent message with the timestamp. She said email was not an official submission method and I needed to use the portal. Jan, the secretary, spoke up. She said she had processed my email request and forwarded it to Ruth. Ruth looked at her. Jan looked down at her laptop. Ruth said the request was still under review and I would get a response within the statutory time frame. I asked what the time frame was. She said 30 days. I said it had been 22 days. She said the clock started when the request was deemed complete. I asked who decided when a request was complete. She said the board treasurer. Ed tried to move on. I sat down. Ruth continued her presentation. She said the association was cracking down on repeat violators and considering additional enforcement measures, including permanent tow authorization for vehicles with outstanding violations. Tom raised his hand and said that sounded illegal. Ruth said it was in the bylaws. Tom asked which section. Ruth said she would provide the citation after the meeting. The meeting ended at 9. I waited until everyone left, then walked up to Ruth. She was packing up the projector. I said I wanted the archived minutes for Stephen's case. She said she already told me how to request them. I said I did not play my hand yet, and she thought that meant I had none. She looked at me. I did not blink. She said we were done talking. I said we were not. She grabbed her bag and walked out. I went home and opened my binder. I pulled the timeline, the screenshots, and the police report number. I also pulled the satisfaction of lien from Stephen's property file. I scanned everything and emailed it to Diane with a subject line that said, "Escalation Plan." She called me 10 minutes later. She said Ruth was panicking, which meant she knew something was buried. She also said the special meeting was a setup to create a paper trail that made me look like the problem. She told me to request a formal hearing, cite the bylaws section on dispute resolution, and attach every piece of evidence. She said if the board denied the hearing, that was grounds for a lawsuit. She also said I needed to find out who authorized the tow, because if it was Ruth acting without board approval, that was fraud. I submitted the hearing request that night. I attached the timeline, the screenshots, the police report number, and a copy of Stephen's lien satisfaction. I cited 3 bylaws sections and requested a neutral mediator. I marked it urgent and copied the entire board, the management company, and the HOA attorney. I hit send at 11:42 p.m. The next morning, I got a response from the HOA attorney. The email said my hearing request was received and would be reviewed by the board at the next regular meeting. The next regular meeting was 3 weeks away. I replied and said the collections letter gave me 14 days, which meant I needed a hearing before the deadline. The attorney replied and said collections was paused pending the hearing. I asked for written confirmation. He did not respond. I called Diane. She said the pause was progress, but I should not trust it. She told me to get the tow company records. She said if Metro Secure had a dispatch log showing who authorized the tow, that was the smoking gun. She said tow companies kept logs for liability and insurance, and they usually released them with a subpoena or a public records request if they contracted with a government entity. I asked how I could get a subpoena without a lawsuit. She said I could not, but I could try asking nicely. I drove to Metro Secure Towing that afternoon. The office was in an industrial park near the airport, a low cinder block building with a chain-link lot full of cars. I walked in and asked for the manager. The guy at the counter said he was the manager. I explained I was a homeowner in the preserve at Oak Grove, and my car had been towed in March. I said I was disputing the authorization and needed a copy of the dispatch log. He asked if I had a case number. I said I had the date and time. He said he needed written authorization from the HOA to release records. I said I was the vehicle owner and the records were about my property. He said the contract was with the HOA, not individual homeowners, so the HOA had to approve the release. I asked if he could at least confirm who authorized the tow. He said he could not. I asked if he kept dispatch logs. He said of course he did, they were required by the city. I said I would file a public records request with the city. He said good luck with that. I left and called Diane. She said the manager was right, dispatch logs were public if the tow company had a city contract. She told me to check if Metro Secure was licensed by Minneapolis or Hennepin County. I looked it up online. Metro Secure had a business license with the city and a towing permit issued by the police department. I filed a public records request with the city clerk, asking for all tow authorizations and dispatch logs for Metro Secure related to the Preserve at Oak Grove from January to April. The city responded in 5 business days. They said Metro Secure submitted monthly summary reports, but did not provide individual dispatch logs unless subpoenaed. They attached the summary reports. I opened them. Each report listed total tows by location, but no details on who authorized each tow. The Preserve at Oak Grove showed 11 tows in March. My car was one of them. I went back to my binder and cross-referenced the summary report with the meeting minutes. Every tow in March happened within 72 hours of a board meeting. The March meeting minutes included a compliance update from Ruth. The update said the board authorized continued enforcement partnerships with approved vendors. It did not name Metro Secure. It did not define approved vendors. It did not specify who could authorize a tow. I called the HOA attorney and asked for a copy of the Metro Secure contract. He said he would check with the board. I said I already requested it and got no response. He said he would follow up. I said if I did not get the contract within 7 days, I would file a complaint with the state attorney general for violation of records access laws. He said that was my right. I hung up. 2 days later, a compliance vendor showed up at my door again. Different guy, same Metro Secure jacket. He said he was there to verify vehicle registration. I said I already verified it. He said the HOA requested a follow-up inspection. I asked to see the authorization. He said it was on his phone. I said, show me. He pulled out his phone and opened an email. The email was from Ruth, sent that morning, with the subject line, compliance follow-up needed for Unit 14. My unit was 14. The email said to verify the vehicle had a current parking pass and photograph any violations. I took a picture of his phone screen with my phone. He said I could not do that. I said I just did. He said he was going to report me. I said go ahead. He left. I forwarded the photo to Diane. She said the email proved Ruth was using Metro Secure as her personal enforcement arm, which was outside her authority as treasurer. She said if I could prove she authorized tows without board approval, that was fraud and possibly embezzlement if she was getting a kickback. She told me to check the HOA financial records for any payments to Metro Secure. I went back to the portal and requested the treasurer reports for the past 2 years. The reports were public and available immediately. I downloaded them and opened the spreadsheets. Metro Secure appeared in every monthly expense report under security services. The amounts varied from $300 to $2,000 per month. There was no line item detail, just a vendor name and a total. I added it to my timeline. The hearing was scheduled for the next board meeting, 3 weeks out. I spent those weeks building my case. I printed every email, every screenshot, every receipt. I organized them by date and theme, tow authorization, deleted appeals, collections threat, vendor harassment, records denial. I put them in a clean binder with tabs and a table of contents. Diane reviewed it and said it was solid. She also said I needed to stay calm during the hearing, because Ruth would try to provoke me into looking unreasonable. The night before the hearing, I got an email from Jan, the secretary. She said the hearing was canceled due to scheduling conflicts. The next available date was 6 weeks out. I replied and said I needed a hearing before the collections deadline. She said the deadline was paused. I asked for written confirmation from the attorney. She did not respond. I called Diane. She said the cancellation was another stalling tactic. She told me to show up at the next regular meeting and demand to be heard during public comments. She said if they tried to shut me down, I should cite the bylaws section on homeowner speech rights and let them violate it on the record. She also said I should bring witnesses if possible. I called Tom and asked if he would come. He said yes. I also called 2 other neighbors who had attended the special meeting. One said yes, the other said no. I went into the meeting with Tom and a woman named Lisa who lived 2 buildings over. The meeting started at 7. Ed called it to order. Ruth sat at the head table with her tabbed binder and a stack of papers. Jan typed on her laptop. I signed in for public comments. Ed read through the agenda. When he reached public comments, I stood up. He said I had 3 minutes. I said I was there for my hearing. He said there was no hearing on the agenda. I said it was scheduled. He said it was canceled. I said I was not notified until the night before and I demanded to be heard. Ruth cut in. She said hearings required advance notice and proper procedure. I said I followed the procedure. She said the board had discretion to postpone hearings. I asked under what authority. She opened her binder and pulled out a laminated policy sheet. She said it was in the hearing procedures section. I asked which version of the procedures. She said the current version. I said the bylaws did not mention a hearing procedures document. She said it was adopted at the last annual meeting. I asked for the meeting minutes. She said they were pending approval. Tom stood up. He said he was at the last annual meeting and there was no discussion of hearing procedures. Ruth said he was mistaken. Tom said he had the draft minutes on his phone. He pulled them up and started reading. Ruth said draft minutes were not official. Tom said they were the only minutes available. Ruth said the board would correct any discrepancies once the minutes were finalized. Tom asked when that would be. Ruth said within 90 days of the meeting. I asked when the meeting was. Tom said 11 months ago. Lisa stood up. She said she was a homeowner and she wanted to know why the board was blocking records requests. Ruth said records requests were processed according to policy. Lisa said she filed a request 6 months ago and never got a response. Ruth said she would look into it. Lisa said that was what Ruth told her 6 months ago. Ruth said she could not discuss individual cases in open session. Lisa said she was not asking Ruth to discuss it, she was stating a fact. Ed tried to move on. I said I was not finished. He said my 3 minutes were up. I said I had not used 3 minutes. He said the discussion had gone over the limit. I said I was entitled to speak. He said I could submit written comments. I said I already submitted written comments and got no response. He said the board would respond within the statutory time frame. I asked what the time frame was. He said 30 days. I said it had been 39 days. He banged the gavel and moved to the next agenda item. I sat down. Diane had told me this would happen. She said the board would stonewall me, and I needed to let them do it on the record so she could use it later. After the meeting, I waited outside under the eave. It was drizzling. Ruth came out with her binder and her phone. I stepped in front of her. She stopped. If this story is getting you fired up, hit the like button and subscribe, because the payback is just getting started. I said I wanted the Metro Secure authorization records. She said she did not have them. I said she sent the compliance vendor to my door. She said the vendor was contracted by the board. I said the email came from her. She said she was acting on behalf of the board. I asked if the board approved the email. She said she did not need board approval for compliance checks. I said that was not what the bylaws said. She said she did not have time for this. She tried to walk past me. I did not move. Tom stepped out behind me. He said Ruth needed to answer the question. Ruth said Tom was not involved. Tom said he was a homeowner and he had the right to observe. Ruth said this was harassment. I said I was recording the conversation. She said I could not record without consent. I said Minnesota was a one-party consent state. She looked at my phone. The recording light was visible, screen turned away. She said I was going to regret this. I said I already regretted moving here. She walked away. I went home and added the meeting to my timeline. Diane called the next morning and said we needed to escalate. She said the board was in full stonewall mode and we were not going to get anywhere through internal channels. She told me to file a complaint with the Minnesota Attorney General's office. She said the complaint should cite the deleted appeals, the blocked records requests, the collections threat, and the vendor harassment. She said the AG would not act immediately, but it created an external record and put the board on notice. I filed the complaint online that afternoon. The form asked for a narrative summary supporting documents and contact information. I attached my timeline, the screenshots, the cease and desist letter, and the police report number. I marked it high priority and requested an investigation. The confirmation email said I would get a response within 60 days. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was the Metro Secure manager. He said he had been reviewing his records and found something I might want to see. I asked what it was. He said he could not discuss it over the phone. I asked why he was calling. He said someone at the city had requested dispatch logs and he thought I should know. I said I filed that request. He said. He figured. He said he could meet me at the yard the next day if I was interested. I met him at noon. He was standing by the office door when I pulled in. He said his name was Mike. He said he had been in the tow business for 20 years and he knew when something smelled wrong. He handed me a folder. Inside was a printout of dispatch logs for March. Each entry had a date, time, address, and authorization name. My tow was on March 14th at 11:37 p.m. The authorization name was Ruth Phillips. I stared at the page. Mike said Ruth called the tow and herself. He said she told the dispatcher the vehicle was abandoned and blocking access. I said my car was in my assigned spot. Mike said he knew. He said he pulled the photo from the driver. The car was in a marked spot with a visible parking pass. He said the driver flagged it as questionable, but Ruth insisted. Mike said he went back through the logs and found 11 tows from the preserve in March. Ruth authorized 10 of them. The other one was authorized by Ed, the board president. I asked why Mike was telling me this. He said the city was asking questions and he did not want to be caught in the middle of a fraud case. He said if Ruth was authorizing tows without board approval, that was on her, not him. I asked if he would testify. He said not unless he was subpoenaed. I asked if I could keep the printout. He said no, but I could take a photo. I took 3 photos with my phone. I called Diane from the parking lot. She said the dispatch log was the smoking gun. She said Ruth had no authority to authorize tows on her own, which meant every tow she authorized was fraudulent. She also said if the board knew and did nothing, they were liable too. She told me to confront Ruth with the log and record her reaction. She said if Ruth admitted she authorized the tows, that was a confession. If she denied it, the log proved she was lying. I drove straight to the clubhouse. Ruth was there, setting up for a committee meeting. I walked in with my phone recording. She saw me and said the meeting was closed. I said I was not there for the meeting. I said I had proof she authorized my tow without board approval. She said that was not true. I said I had the dispatch log. She said dispatch logs were confidential. I said I got them from the tow company. She said the tow company had no authority to release them. I said the manager released them voluntarily. She said he was lying. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo. She looked at it. Her face went blank. She said the log was fake. I said it had timestamps and her name. She said anyone could fake a log. I said I also had the driver photo showing my car in the correct spot with a valid pass. She said the pass format was wrong. I said the pass format did not change until after the tow. She said that was not true. I said I had the meeting minutes proving it. She said the minutes were preliminary. Tom walked in. He said he heard Ruth's voice from outside and wanted to witness. Ruth said this was a private conversation. Tom said it was in a public building. Ruth said she was done talking. I said we were not done. I said I had filed a complaint with the Attorney General and I was going to file a police report for fraud. She said I had no grounds. I said unauthorized towing was theft. She said she had authority. I asked under what authority. She did not answer. She grabbed her binder and tried to leave. I stepped in front of her. She said I was blocking her. I said I wanted answers. She said I was harassing her. Tom said she needed to answer the question. She said she was calling the police. I said go ahead. She pulled out her phone. Tom pulled out his phone. I kept recording. Ruth dialed. A dispatcher answered. Ruth said she was being harassed by a homeowner at the Preserve at Oak Grove clubhouse and needed assistance. The dispatcher asked if there was a physical threat. Ruth said no, but the homeowner was blocking her exit. The dispatcher said she would send an officer to check. Ruth hung up. We waited. Ruth stood by the door with her binder. Tom stood by the window. I stood in the middle of the room with my phone. No one spoke. The officer arrived 12 minutes later. He was a young guy, maybe late 20s, with a body camera and a calm voice. He asked what was going on. Ruth said I was harassing her. I said I was asking questions about a fraudulent tow. The officer asked Ruth if I had threatened her. She said no. He asked if I had touched her. She said no. He asked if I was preventing her from leaving. She said yes. I stepped aside. The officer asked me to explain. I said the HOA treasurer authorized a tow of my vehicle without board approval and I had proof. He asked to see the proof. I showed him the dispatch log photo. He looked at it, then asked Ruth if she authorized the tow. She said she did, as part of her duties as treasurer. He asked if the board authorized her to do that. She said compliance enforcement was under her purview. He asked if that was in writing. She said it was in the bylaws. He asked to see the bylaws. She said she did not have them with her. Tom said he had the bylaws on his phone. He pulled them up and showed the officer. The officer read the section on treasurer duties. It said the treasurer was responsible for financial oversight and fee collection. It did not mention towing or compliance. The officer asked Ruth where her authority came from. She said it was implied. He said implied authority was not clear authority. He asked if the board had voted to give her that power. She said she did not need a vote. He said that sounded like a civil dispute. He asked if anyone wanted to file a report. I said yes. The officer took my statement. I explained the deleted appeals, the collections threat, the vendor harassment, and the dispatch log. He took notes and said he would file a report. He also said if the tow was unauthorized, that could be theft by fraud, but it would require an investigation. He asked if I had contacted the city attorney. I said no. He said I should. He gave me a card with the number. He asked Ruth if she had anything to add. She said I was harassing her, and she wanted a restraining order. He said she could file for one, but based on what he saw, there was no immediate threat. He said we should resolve it through the HOA or civil court. Ruth left. Tom and I stayed. The officer asked if I was safe. I said yes. He said if Ruth contacted me again, I should call. He said he would file the report by end of shift. I thanked him. He left. Tom said I should play the trump card. I said I was waiting for the right moment. He said the right moment was now. I said I wanted the full board present. He asked when the next meeting was. I said 2 weeks. He said Ruth would try to stop me from speaking. I said she could try. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I printed the dispatch log, the portal screenshots, the timeline, the cease and desist letter, and the police report. I put them in a presentation binder with tabs. Diane reviewed it and said it was bulletproof. She also said I should play the trump card in a public setting so the board could not bury it. She suggested playing it outside the clubhouse before the meeting, with neighbors present, so Ruth could not control the narrative. The night of the meeting, I arrived early. Tom, Lisa, and 3 other neighbors were already there, standing under the eave. It was drizzling again. Ruth pulled up and saw us. She got out of her car with her binder and walked toward the clubhouse. I stepped in front of her. She stopped. I said I had something she needed to hear. She said she did not have time. I said she would want to make time. She said she was calling management. I said they were already copied on everything. She said I was harassing her. I pulled out my phone and put it on speaker. I played the recording of her authorizing the tow. The dispatcher voice said, "Confirmation. Vehicle tow authorized by Ruth Phillips. Unit 14, 11:37 p.m., March 14th. Ruth's voice said, "Yes, abandoned vehicle blocking access. Remove immediately." The neighbors heard it. Tom said that was fraud. Lisa said Ruth lied. Another neighbor said she authorized his tow too. Ruth said the recording was fake. I said it came from Metro Secure. She said they had no authority to release it. I said the manager released it voluntarily because he did not want to be part of a fraud case. She said she was calling her attorney. I said, "Go ahead." A gust of wind came through and lifted the binder out of Ruth's hands. Her printed packet went airborne in a gust of wind at the worst possible moment. papers scattered across the wet pavement. She scrambled to pick them up. Tom stepped on one. Lisa picked up another and read it. It was a blank vendor invoice template with Ruth's signature at the bottom. Lisa said this was the invoice Ruth submitted for Metro Secure payments. She said there was no line item detail. Tom said that was fraud. Ruth grabbed the pages and ran inside. I followed. The meeting room was filling up. Ed and Jan were at the head table. Ruth sat down and tried to compose herself. Ed called the meeting to order. I stood up during public comments. Ed said I had 3 minutes. I said I needed 5. He said 3 was the limit. I said I would talk fast. I laid out everything: the deleted appeals, the collections threat, the vendor harassment, the dispatch log showing Ruth authorized my tow without board approval, the blank invoices, the pattern of tows targeting prior homeowners. I held up the binder and said I had proof of every claim. I said I filed a complaint with the Attorney General, a police report, and a records request with the city. I said if the board did not retract the fines, refund my money, and hold Ruth accountable, I would file a lawsuit. Tom stood up and said he would testify. Lisa stood up and said she would testify. 3 other neighbors stood up. Ed looked at Ruth. Ruth said I was lying. I played the dispatch recording again. The room went silent. Ed asked Ruth if she authorized the tow. She said yes. He asked if the board approved it. She said no. He asked why. She said she thought she had implied authority. He said there was no such thing. Jan stopped typing. She said she had been recording the meeting, per policy. She said the recording captured Ruth's admission. She asked if the board wanted her to preserve it. Ed said yes. Ruth said the recording was inadmissible. Ed said it was not a court, it was an HOA meeting. He said the board would review the matter and respond within 7 days. I said 7 days was not fast enough. I said the city inspector was coming the next day to confirm what the HOA could not enforce. Ed asked what I meant. I said I filed a complaint with the city zoning office about selective towing enforcement. I said a city inspector confirming what the HOA cannot enforce would clarify whether Ruth's actions violated city code. Ed said he was not aware of any city complaint. I said he was now. The meeting ended at 9:30. Ruth tried to leave through the back door. I followed. She turned and said I was done. I said she was done. She said I had no proof. I said I had a dispatch log, a police report, and an attorney general complaint. She said none of it would stick. I said we would see. The next morning, the HOA attorney called me. He said the board met an emergency session and decided to settle. He said the board would refund my tow fine and guest parking violations in full. He said the board would also pay my filing fees to end the fight. He said in exchange, I would withdraw the Attorney General complaint and agree not to sue. I said I also wanted a public apology. He said the board would issue a retraction letter at the next meeting. I said I wanted Ruth to read it aloud. He paused, then said he would recommend it. I called Diane. She said take the deal. She said I won. I said it did not feel like enough. She said I got my money back. I cleared my name, and I forced the board to hold Ruth accountable. She said that was a win. I said, what about the other homeowners Ruth targeted? She said I could not fight every battle. She said I could share my evidence with them and let them decide. The next board meeting was 2 weeks later. I arrived early with Tom and Lisa. The room was packed. Word had spread. Ruth sat at the head table, silent. Ed opened the meeting and said the board had reviewed a compliance matter and determined that certain enforcement actions were taken without proper authority. He said the board was issuing a retraction and a refund to the affected homeowner. He handed a paper to Ruth. She did not move. Ed said the board expected her to read it aloud. She looked at him. He did not blink. Ruth picked up the paper. Her hands shook. She read, "The board acknowledges that the tow authorization for Unit 14 on March 14th was issued without board approval and did not comply with association procedures. The board retracts the associated fines and apologizes for the inconvenience." She stopped. Ed said, "Keep going." She said, "The board is reviewing compliance procedures to ensure proper oversight." She put the paper down. Ed said the board was also terminating the contract with Metro Secure Towing, pending a full audit. He said homeowners with similar complaints should contact the management company for review. He said the board would report its findings at the next meeting. Tom raised his hand. Ed nodded. Tom said he wanted to know if Ruth would remain as treasurer. Ed said the board was discussing it. Lisa stood up and said the board should remove Ruth immediately. Another neighbor said Ruth should resign. Ruth said she had done nothing wrong. The room erupted. Ed banged the gavel. He said the board would address the matter in executive session. The meeting ended. The next day, Ruth resigned. The board posted a notice on the portal. It said Ruth Phillips had stepped down as treasurer effective immediately. It said the board thanked her for her service. It did not mention fraud or misconduct. I called Diane. She said that was as good as it gets. She said the board wanted to avoid liability, so they buried it. I said it was not justice. She said it was closure. I also got a call from the city inspector. He said he reviewed my complaint and found no city code violations related to the towing. He said HOA enforcement was a civil matter unless it involved health or safety. I said the tow was fraudulent. He said that was between me and the HOA. I thanked him and hung up. 2 weeks later, I got a check from the HOA for $460. The memo line said refund per board resolution. I deposited it. I also got an email from Lisa. She said 3 other homeowners had filed complaints after my meeting testimony. She said the board was conducting an audit of all Metro Secure invoices. She said if they found more fraud, she would let me know. Tom stopped by my place a few days later. He said the neighborhood was different now. He said people were paying attention to the board. He said my case had opened eyes. I said I just wanted my money back. He said I got more than that. He said I got accountability. I went back to work. My dispatcher shifts kept me busy. I still got letters from the HOA, but they were routine now. No threats, no vendor visits, no phantom violations. I kept my binder on a shelf in case I ever needed it again. A month later, I was checking the HOA portal and saw Ruth's group post had been removed and replaced with a correction. The correction said the prior post contained inaccurate information regarding enforcement procedures and had been retracted. I took a screenshot and added it to my binder. I also heard through Tom that Ruth moved out of the preserve. He said she sold her unit and left the state. He said the board never filed charges, but the Attorney General complaint was still open. I checked the AG website. The case status said under review. I did not hold my breath. I kept the dispatch log photo on my phone. Every time I saw it, I remembered the look on Ruth's face when I played the recording outside the clubhouse. That moment was worth every hour I spent building the case. The HOA was quieter now. The new treasurer was a retired accountant who posted monthly financial summaries on the portal. The board meetings were shorter and less hostile. I still attended when I could, just to keep an eye on things. Tom and Lisa attended too. We formed a small group of homeowners who actually read the meeting minutes and asked questions. I never got a formal apology from Ruth. The board retraction was the closest I came. But the refund check and the termination of the Metro Secure contract were enough. I also kept a copy of the police report. If Ruth ever tried to run for HOA office again, I had the proof to stop her. I learned a few things from the fight. First, document everything. Every email, every call, every interaction. Second, stay calm. Ruth wanted me to lose my temper so she could paint me as the problem. I did not give her that. Third, find allies. Tom and Lisa made a difference. Fourth, know your rights. The bylaws were my weapon. Fifth, do not trust the board to police itself. External pressure from the Attorney General and the city inspector forced the board to act. I also learned that HOAs are only as good as the people running them. Ruth had free rein because no one was watching. Once homeowners started paying attention, the board had to change. That was the real victory. Not the money, not the retraction, but the shift in power. The neighborhood feels different now. People talk to each other more. People show up to meetings. People ask questions. The board is more transparent. The minutes are posted on time. Records requests get answered. It is not perfect, but it is better. I still live at the preserve. I still work dispatch. I still park in the same spot. No more tows, no more notices, no more threats. Just a quiet neighborhood with an HOA that finally learned it has to follow its own rules. I appreciate you coming back.